And it's so interesting that the first public trillionaire is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and that happened right in the middle of coronavirus. That's not a coincidence. That is showing that the capitalist consumerist culture is inherently linked to the fear programming that's being perpetuated by coronavirus, by COVID-19.
Hello, you beautiful bluebirds, and welcome back to another episode of Deja Blu. My favorite thing to do these days is to talk to remarkable individuals, share codes, share wisdom, share laughs, drink unicorn tears. We have Briana in the house today, and she rolled up looking ghetto fabulous with her hat and her outfit and all the things. And she put 2 cans of unicorn tears, mad tasty, pure sparkling water on the table. If anybody I know that would grab this off the shelf, it would be Briana Lynn. And so just coming in style, and we get to do another podcast today. And today we have a video.
We get to be on video.
So you get to see actually what's going on and not just hear our madness, which is beautiful. And if you are listening to this on Audible, you'll know that there is a YouTube version too, and you can go on YouTube and watch the video version.
At the very least, check us out. We look fabulous.
Yes. She's definitely gone above and beyond today with the Ghetto Fabulous. And if you're not familiar with who Briana Lynn is, then have you listened to Deja Blu podcast? Have you heard any of the episodes? The #1 podcast in the Deja Blu history, her story, is episode number 11, The Witch Hunt,
Season
and Cultural
1.
Appropriation. Girl, this podcast is still sitting at #1. I've done podcasts with Aubrey Marcus. I've done podcasts with Sadhguru. I've done podcasts with Richard Rudd. I've done podcasts with some brilliant minds that are very well known around the planet. And yet still you are sitting at the #1 spot. Oh, humble Briana Lynn.
It's the witch. It's the witches. It's not even me. It's the witches who be listening. You know what I mean? Like, them be getting on them podcasts, the witches.
Yeah.
It's a safe place for us to gather. All those other people have other safe places that they can go. Podcasts are a safe place for witches.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it. And, you know, you hail in from the forest. You live at the Mother Tree in a small little, bell tent that is expanding with a white wolf, 2 pythons in the forest next to a creek. Doing the damn thing.
I have the dirty fingernails to prove it.
She came over and I was
I do wear fancy things, but I got dirty fingernails and dirty toenails because you can't get the forest dirt quite out of it until you like scrub and soak.
Right.
Haven't done that in a while.
Well, it's just a part of you now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's perma-dirt, we like to call it.
There you have earthly phalanges.
Yeah. Earthly extremities. It's wonderful.
Anyway, Briana, something that I've noticed, in fact, actually, in honor of you being here, for all you listeners at home, we'll just give you a little AMSR. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
What's it called? ASMR. I'm learning. You ready? For all you out there. Ooh. Oh, delicious. We're drinking unicorn tears and we're going to go deep. So
we're not even sponsored by them yet. When Unicorn Tears is ready to sponsor us, aka Mad Tasty, you're more than welcome to send us more of these. Yes.
100%. I haven't even tasted it yet, though.
Taste it first.
It's mad tasty.
It's mad tasty.
It's pretty on brand.
Yeah.
All right. So, Briana, whenever you're on the podcast, we tend to go pretty deep pretty quick. I remember at one point we had just wrapped up a private immersion and we were like, I'm feeling alive. Let's do a podcast. What do you want to do it on? You were like, unpacking racism. I was like, okay, we're going to go there.
We just did 12 hours of work and now you want to unpack racism.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is you in a nutshell.
Yes.
And so today we sat down and about a minute and a half ago, like, what do you want to talk about? And you laid out a bunch of topics on the table, one of them being anal.
Anal sex, just to be clear.
I just want to talk about the asshole in general.
I do.
Yeah, all of it.
It's very important.
But today we've decided to take a slight pivot because we have become the queen of pivots, and we're going to pivot into what's actually happening on the planet right now, and like allow your channel to open, your infinite wisdom to flow through and pour through, and share your unique lens on life around what is presently happening. Also, I feel like I'm just having a realization. I don't know if I gave you a fully formal introduction for the people that haven't actually heard you on the podcast.
There might be a few of them.
Yes, it happens quite recently it's happening. So Briana Lynn not only is one of my bestest friends, sister, muse, collaborator, inspiration, one of the women that, in fact, one of 3 women in my life that has given me the ultimate permission slip to own me, like to hold space for the fullest expression of whatever wants to come through, and that it's a safe place. In fact, it's not just tolerated, it's not just space holding, it's welcomed, it is encouraged, it is celebrated in your presence. And so I've been able to just find the weird, the wild, the quirky, and everything in between in your presence, and that is one of the greatest gifts I have ever received my whole life. So I am just so grateful every time we get to collaborate and I get to share and highlight your voice with the platform, with the bluebirds listening at home,
We
wherever
love
they
you,
are.
bluebirds.
And also Briana is a guide into how to rewild. She takes people on vision quests, and she is also one of the co-founders of the Earth Temple, which is a shamanic school of the shamanic arts and prayer, and also allowing us to reconnect to our true nature in nature, and recognizing the Earth Temple is already here all around us. It's out in nature. And she is also a content creator. She has a podcast. And there's so many different things, but we'll let it unravel. We'll let
explore.
We'll let you share and you speak, and then let it go from there.
Yeah.
So tell me, Briana Lynn, you woke up this morning. What was on your heart? What are we doing? What is this second wave? What is your unique lens and your perception of what is going on? And I'm just curious to just hear your raw.
Thank you, love. Thank you for the introduction. I first want to start by saying that anything that comes through me is usually for me first, is usually information for me. So I'm not here to proclaim to be a medical professional or any sort of person that's giving advice in any way. I'm going to open my doors and allow to flow through what wants to come through. Whatever resonates, great. Whatever doesn't, I'm not going to argue with you about it online. That's just how it's going to go. You're more than welcome to make whatever comments you want. However, I'm not here to argue. This is just my perspective. And if you have a different perspective, that's totally okay. And that's the frame that I really want to introduce today, which is called non-binary thinking. Dun, dun, dun. It's something our good friend Siddhartha Gautama introduced to us through the lane of Buddhism. And what it really is that experience is a multiplicitous reality. And that we as human beings can only have really one perspective on that reality. And my favorite metaphor is if you put a bunch of blindfolded people in a room, and there's an elephant in that room, and they each get one hand to touch the elephant, and they have to figure out what that elephant is by communicating with each other and not moving their hand at all. And they each have to describe what they're feeling. That is sharing felt experience. That's also the premise of non-binary thinking. It's not if you're feeling hair, then you're correct because I'm also feeling hair. Well, if you're feeling a tusk, then you're correct because I'm also feeling a tusk. No, you're feeling a tusk, I'm feeling hair. Let's talk about what animal this might be based on the fact that we have two different experiences, that our differing experiences aren't actually meant to overpower each other, but are meant to inform each other of the larger truth at play.
Getting the 360 perspective. 180.
And the importance at this time, I think, whether it's coronavirus or we're talking about the violence that's happening in the Middle East or the militarization of China or the import-export activities of Venezuela, whatever it is that we want to talk about sociopolitically or anything that we want to dive into spiritually from root chakra to crown chakra, we get to remember that any information that you're receiving at this time is going to be a singular perspective, and your perspective is just as valid, and that it's vital that we listen to the different perspectives, but don't take any of them as absolute truth. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a space for what is more right for the majority of good. We want to look for the truths that are for the highest good of all.
And do you believe that the argument, so you say like, okay, I'm sharing this from my truth, not the truth of the capital T, and I'm not here to argue. Do you believe that arguments are born from believing that our perspective is the truth of the capital T?
Yes, and I would be here to argue if it was the old-fashioned Greek way, where it's like iron sharpens iron. Like we want to actually,
sparring ring?
like, okay, so what you're saying is this, and I want to learn this definition more. Like, what do you actually mean by this? If we were there to unpack each other's truths, I'm down to argue in that way. That's the original definition of argue in the Greek form. It's a Socratic method. It's to unpack the languaging in order to understand what's actually going on. I'm down for that. I'm not down for someone to categorize me or for me to categorize someone else as right or wrong based on what it is that they're experiencing and expressing.
So the reason why I laughed was because when you said like I'm down to argue the old-fashioned Greek way, I just visualized you like with knee-high sandal straps on with spars and you know in the
naked
middle of
mud
an amphitheater,
wrestling,
like, like getting it, and I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't want to argue on Instagram, but she is down to spar with you.
Anytime. We will find ourselves an amphitheater and we will make it happen for sure. It's a lot healthier than what I see mostly going on Instagram. So I'm grateful for that visual. So I'm down to spar if there's questions or concepts that we want to unpack and slow down. But really, I think what I've been noticing a lot in the media, the little that I am taking in right now around coronavirus or around, we'll just start there, is that there's a right way to do this. And we are facing not only a global pandemic, but a global lie scheme that is being uncovered simultaneously around pedophilia, around the import and export of petrochemicals, around the import and export of food that is picked and grown by slaves, around the slavery that produces the majority of our clothing. There's a lot coming to light right now simultaneously, and coronavirus is being utilized as the main distraction from all of these other conversations. It doesn't mean it isn't real. It doesn't mean it isn't a conversation to be had. In legal terms, it's called a red herring. And basically what that means is a distraction. It's a term. It's a something like the toro for the bull. Come over here, bull. Come over here. Don't look at that clown running around. Look over here. Look over here. And it's being used to take our energy and take our eyes off of the main issue. The main issue on our planet right now is that we as human beings have lost connection with each other and our planet Earth. So much so that the trajectory that we're on in the way that we're consuming petrochemicals, in the way that we're consuming pharmaceuticals, in the way that we're consuming human beings as sex slave, domestic workers, and clothing and farming slaves, is right now we are about to destroy our planet. We are on the trajectory within the next 10 to 20 years to completely destroy our planet. And coronavirus has become the thing on the front pages, and that is an absolute distraction. It doesn't mean coronavirus isn't real. It doesn't mean it isn't part of the conversation. What it does mean is that the majority of companies on our planet right now, petrochemical companies, pharmaceutical companies, food import-export companies, human slavery companies, arms, killing machines and weapons companies will not make money if we start to pivot our behavior. If we stop being a war machine on the planet, specifically the United States is the largest militia, means our military is bought and sold, mostly by Halliburton, mostly by Bechtel. These are companies that you can look up and do a lot of research on. We have so much debt to the Chinese government and so much debt to these privately owned corporations around the world that our military is then rented out to places around the world. These are my high school friends. Our military is rented out to places around the world to be the private security force for these private corporations. And right now, these are all crumbling because we are losing the amount of petroleum that we can extract from the planet at the moment. The petroleum of our planet is her plasma, and extracting all of it will cause places of our planet to implode. And so it's not only the burning of petrochemicals that we're talking about, it's also what happens when we take fossil fuels are 100 million years plus old. This is old dinosaur bones, old trees, old rocks, broken down shells that have then become compressed over time and create a plasma on our planet that we've been extracting without any thought of what happens when you extract plasma from a human. When you extract all the plasma, they die. Not just the burning of petrochemicals, it's the extraction of it. The largest corporations on our planet right now are deeply dependent on petrochemicals continuing to be extracted. And we are having the conversation around a dwindling resource. And the biggest distraction that has come up has been coronavirus. So non-binary thinking, this is one perspective on this. You're more than welcome to research any of this. All of it has been from about 22 years of research that I've been diving into. And this piece specifically around a global pandemic has been something that has been talked about, especially in the United States, for quite some time, around what it is that we could do to come together. What would we need to come together? It would either be a war or a pandemic. And what do I mean by come together? I mean economically continue to buy and sell without thinking about our consumption of petrochemicals. So if petrochemicals became something that we started to question and really morally, ethically feel into what it is that we are doing as a human species, I think what I perceive is that the fear would be that the economy would collapse. And so there's this distraction, this coronavirus, which keeps us buying and selling, because when people are in fear and fight and flight, but they can't connect it to anything, they can't connect it to direct action, one of the behaviors that we've been taught as a consumerist capitalist society is to consume more goods, is to buy more. And it's so interesting that the first public trillionaire is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and that happened right in the middle of coronavirus. That's not a coincidence. That is showing that the capitalist consumerist culture is inherently linked to the fear programming that's being perpetuated by coronavirus, by COVID-19 specifically. And again, I'm not saying that COVID-19 doesn't exist. I'm not saying that it isn't real. It's not something that we shouldn't have a conversation about. The way that it's being framed is that this is the biggest issue that we have on our planet right now, and that is bullshit. Coronavirus is not the biggest issue that we have on our planet right now. The biggest issue that we have on our planet right now is pedophilia and sex slavery of children, and the import and export of petrochemicals to the extent that it is destroying our planet. Those are the biggest conversations. Those are the things that are going to destroy humanity, not this COVID-19. The numbers just do not even compare to how many people die in war in the Middle East every day because of how we are extracting oil and petroleum from that area. So the invitation around COVID-19 is to really start asking some internal questions of why is this pretty much the only thing on the news right now? When there are so many things happening in the world, so many people who are suffering for many various different reasons, why has this become the thing to push forward? Why has this become the only conversation there is? So that's one piece of opening our binary thinking. Secondly, opening up our binary thinking around how we do it right and how we do it wrong. There is absolutely zero evidence that shows that masks prevent viruses. As a matter of fact, viruses travel on water droplets. And if your mask cannot prevent water from going through it, it's actually ineffectual. And that's just what it is. And so it could help prevent a bit of the spray, like it wouldn't be able to go as far. But if you're within a distance of any human being and touch any surface that they have also touched, you will contract whatever it is that they're holding within their water droplet system. That's just kind of how we work as human beings. We're living in one ecosystem. Our ecosystem doesn't stop at 6 feet. Like this whole idea of 6 feet of distance is completely arbitrary. And so the non-binary thinking comes in of like mask, no mask, 6 feet, not 6 feet, and ask the questions like, why 6 feet? Is that actually useful? Why masks? Is that actually useful? I'm not telling anyone to not social distance. I'm not telling anyone to not wear a mask. What I'm inviting is non-binary thinking. And it's dangerous. Non-binary thinking is dangerous because when authoritarian governments need to control people, they're going to tell you what is right and what is wrong. And those who comply are good citizens, and those who don't comply are bad citizens. So there's going to be a lot of binary thinking coming up over the next few months and weeks.
And this is what we're seeing on Instagram right now.
100%.
Is that there are the things that are being shared online by our government of this is how we do it, and then anybody that is not following these rules get ostracized from society. And so we're seeing a huge polarity now on Instagram, and going deep into the conversation of the vaccinators, the non-vaccinators, and then everyone's arguing it out with each other. Convincing almost, well, this is the right way to do it, but not fully listening to the divide that is actually happening within the people. And I've spoken about this on the podcast previously, is like the playing card that we do have as a collective is the numbers, but we are so divided and arguing with each other that we're actually throwing our only playing card away here.
The only one, which would be to unify. And to unify means to look at the pieces where we overlap, Non-binary thinking requires that I find the humanity in the person who I feel like we have no connection. Like, where do we connect? Where can we connect? Can we both agree that we want our children to be safe? 100%. Can we both agree that we want to be healthy? Can we both agree that we would love to have a government that doesn't lie to us? Can we both agree that we would like to preserve our planet to live on, I don't know, forever? Potentially, like, if we can find some places where we agree, and then from that place, build out the behavior. But right now, the behavior has become a metaphor for the good or the bad of the person. If you behave in this way, you're a good person. If you behave in this way, you're a bad person. It's much more subtle than that. I think at this time with COVID-19 and with everything that's going on in the world, we as human beings are taking calculated risks. Like, you and I are taking a risk not wearing a mask around each other, not knowing exactly who it is that we've been exposed to, theoretically. Or we're taking a risk knowing exactly who we've been exposed to, having just taken tests and sitting down with each other. You know what I mean? Like, everything we do at this point is a calculated risk and has always been. It's just time to acknowledge that people are making choices, calculated risks, based on how much they know, what they know, and who they're getting their sources from. So if someone's wearing a mask, don't judge them. If someone's not wearing a mask, don't judge them. Mm-hmm. This is really the opportunity for humanity to get curious about the experience, because no one is not wearing a mask inherently because they are an asshole or because they want to hurt someone else. What I believe is happening is that people are taking calculated risks based on the fact that our government has inherently lied to us for a long time. I would say pretty much for the past 80 years, the United States government has been in one giant lie to what it actually is. The United States government and the president themselves is a puppet to cover up the fact that we are a petrochemical country. We are a petrochemical front that then sells it to other countries around the world. And we are part of a mafioso chain. And our puppet government, since about 80 years ago, has been just to distract the people with enough daytime drama to get us to think that our votes matter. But the truth is, it doesn't matter who's in office. They're not going to address what's happening in the Middle East. Whether it's Biden or Trump, they're probably just having a cigar and wine after the elections anyways, laughing about the fact that they're still going to get their buyout from the petrochemical companies that supported both of them to begin with, and the pharmaceutical companies, and the farm companies, and the child sex slave companies, and the arms companies. Like, the United States government is false. And the sooner we begin to realize that, with just a lot of calm in our system, with just a lot of deep breaths and acknowledging, like, we've been sold a lie of democracy. We don't have democracy. We don't. Electoral college is one of the furthest things from democracies. And not only that, you can't even be in the running to be a president unless you have access to millions of dollars. That's not a democracy. And so right now, what we're facing as an American people, I think, is an awakening to the fact that no matter who the president is, we're still going to be lied to. We're still going to be sold bullshit products that we don't need. Our best interests are not being looked out for as individuals or as communities. And at the end of the day, it's about individuals who can make money off of the shit that we buy off of Amazon, or that's petrochemical based, or that's pharmaceutical based, or that's clothing based, made by sex slaves or slaves from around the world. And until we get to the heart of what a government is supposed to do for its people, we cannot address the larger issue of democracy or being a democratic leader in the world. Like, that's a joke. You go anywhere in Latin America and talk about the United States as a democratic leader, the majority of the people will laugh at you because everyone else knows. The United States and the United States citizens seem to be the only ones who think that this is actually a true free democracy. No, my friends, if you have debt, you are a slave. You cannot leave this country and come back in freely unless you have a plan to pay your debt. And most people that I know are in debt: credit card debt, school debt, car debt, home debt. And that's the way that they keep people into the capitalist consumerist system, is through debt. And they get them young, 16, 17, 18 years old before they go into college, get them at least five numbers in debt. You can't leave and come back if you have debt. You'll get arrested. You'll become a slave to the system even more, get incarcerated. So until we really look at what this system is, it's a mafioso banking system that's a cover-up for large corporations around the world, the U.S. government, and has been so for 80 plus years, since at least World War II, arguably, if not before then. Not until we get there can we ask the question, is information about masks and information about COVID real or not real? Here's the thing, is that they've been selling us false information for a long time. So to receive information from the government, from the CDC, from Pfizer, we already know is sideways. To what extent that they're lying, we actually don't know. But we know that it is not true, not entirely true.
So I want to acknowledge the courage that it takes to speak up and say these things. Because I can feel that a lot of people are feeling the lies, feeling the corruption, feeling the distortion, feeling the distractions.
Yep.
And yet the second that somebody speaks up about it on Instagram, online, it's a scary place because people are really angry, really confused, and are ready to bite someone's head off if they're starting to push a message that is not actually what they believe in. Yeah. And so it takes a lot of courage to, for me personally, I have been really sitting with the child pedophilia piece. And that we went out and did a solo quest and a vision quest out in the desert. And it just came through really clearly for me to be a voice for this specific topic. And yet since that very point, I have gone through a plethora of emotions around, well, what's the best call to action? And, I have this platform and there's like the more people that are listening, the more people that are going to disagree with a certain message, and to expose something that is so deep and so dark, and to look at the history of individuals that have spoken up about this and how they've been, most minimally had their Instagram account deleted because of censorship, and then even been killed for these conversations and being able to utilize public platforms to share messages like this. So it's like when one comes to terms with that there is something that is going on here that is not what meets the eye, and I'm clocking onto it. One of the first pieces is that you get ostracized by society, you get ostracized by your blood family, you get called a conspiracy theorist, you get labeled as crazy and written off. And then outside of that, then you're actually under physical threat.
Yep.
And so it's like for the people that are listening at home that have been feeling the lies and have been feeling the distortion and feel this fire within their stomach, but are also afraid and not really sure the sense of direction to go in when speaking about this thing. What have you realized when coming to terms with that piece within you, all this truth, all this study, everything that you've done before sitting on Deja Blu podcast to be able to share your truth? What has been your process around finding what feels like your truth and then garnering the courage to communicate it so clearly?
That's a great question. I think I've said this on the podcast before. I've definitely said it to the students who are with the Earth Temple School of Shamanic Arts, is a morning practice, a rising ritual. The first thing in the morning is mine, and starting to train our nervous systems on how to calibrate to our own breath so that whatever comes my way, I can start to understand that it is someone's reaction to my activation in their system and not take everything on personally. Without a morning practice, I would not be alive, for sure. And claiming that the political is spiritual and that the spiritual is political, and that at this time, those two things cannot be separate. To be an awake, feeling human being and not addressing the political climate at this time is not an awake, feeling human being. And so it's a combination of personal practice, breath, sound, movement, touch. Make sure it includes all four of those in some way.
And breath, sound, movement, touch. It can be remembered by Bullshit Mountain.
BSMT, Bullshit Mountain. You're moving the bullshit mountain out of the way, BSMT. Every day, first thing in the morning, get some breath, get some sound, get some movement, get some touch in your body to let you know that you're here for you. Because finding truth has a lot to do with the felt experience. We are electromagnetic energy in a flesh puppet made of water. So we can feel when the electromagnetic energy of a message or another human being is off. We are all walking, talking lie detector tests. Now, if we have layers and layers of lies on top of us that we have to uphold, it is harder for us to sense the lies of other people. This is why a government can lie to the majority of our culture, because in our culture, lying is propagated. The majority of our holidays are all based on lies that we tell children. Let's just start there. okay? These are not mythologies. These are not children's stories. We pretend like things exist that don't actually exist, and we laugh about it behind children's backs. So from a young age, we are preparing each other to lie completely.
I remember when I found out, well, first and foremost, I could not believe that my parents would lie to me about Santa Claus. So I defended my parents in school when I was like 8 years old, and everyone was laughing at me in school because they were onto something I wasn't onto, that Santa actually wasn't real.
Yeah.
And my parents went to, to make it magical for me, went to a very big extent to like really convince me that Santa was real. And so that was a very memorable moment when I remember my mother actually said to me, Santa's not real. And I was like, wait, so you've been lying to me this whole time? I couldn't compute it.
No.
And I remember it very significantly.
Yeah.
That moment when realizing that actually it wasn't the truth.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something very binary here. It's fucked up. It's fucked up that we lie to our children that way. It's one thing to introduce the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is imagination. P.S. Same thing, same. It's one thing to introduce imagination and play with our children and play with the fairies and play with Santa Claus and help them understand that when we imagine something, when our eyes are closed, our eyes are open, and imagine that it's there, it can become reality through our words and through our creation. We have made Santa Claus a real thing. There are Santa Clauses in malls everywhere, right? Like, we've made this to be a real thing, but to understand that the fifth dimension is not the third dimension. Children do not understand that there are different dimensions. They feel that the imaginal world and the 3D world are the same. And as proper stewards of young people, it is very important for us to help them distinguish between the dimensions. When we merge those dimensions and then tell them that their imagination that entire time wasn't real, we basically cut them off from their ability to trust their own imagination, to trust their creative impulses. So not only are we lying to children as a basis, we're then cutting them off from the greatest gift that we have outside of attention and intention is imagination.
And I think our parents are really doing what they believe to be a magical experience for their children, right? It's not coming from ill intentions.
No,
can only speak on behalf of my experience. Like, my parents genuinely were like, we want to create it as magical as possible, as majestic. And I remember actually I was tapping into the fifth dimension because I would see Santa flying through the sky because I was so convinced he was real, and I saw his sleigh and I was like, there he is. And like, it was a very, very, very magical experience for me. I think, what you're talking about is from the meta perspective of like the actual lie that keeps getting fed, and how we're creating a narrative at a very young age where there is like this version of truth and the actual truth, which is now what we're seeing even just with our political conversation.
And understanding that it's important to have imaginations with children. It's important to have these magical worlds and describe them as such. Describe them as magical worlds. Describe that it is an imagination. Allow Santa to be real in the 5D. Because then all of a sudden, when Santa is discovered as not real, he disappears. That's horrifying for children.
I felt lonely.
Yes.
He was somebody that was my homie.
He checked in on
disappeared.
you.
And everyone was laughing at me because I believed in him way longer than everybody else did.
It's traumatizing. So that as the base for our culture in Western countries and westernized countries, the basis that we are totally okay with lying to our children and manipulating their imagination is why we are so manipulable as a political culture, in my opinion, is that we begin at a young age lying to each other about what is reality.
So then what I have studied and learned about the law of karma, specifically thank you to Richard Rudd and the Gene Keys, that every single thing ever spoken, written, done in action, any sort of form that is sent out is documented in the Akashic records. The Akashic records being records of anything that ever has been and anything that ever will be. And it always, always has to return to its place of origin. So when I think about that on an individual level, it's like, okay, I remember all of those times when I was a kid and I lied, and that always, always got found out, whether it was that day, a year later, it always came up to the surface and it came back to its place of origin. So I have evidential proof that this is to be correct in my life.
Yeah.
I've also learned that the more that I give, the more that I receive. So it works both ways. Now, I think about this on the meta scale, and I think about the government lying to us, you say, since the past 80 years at least. Why or where or how is this coming back to its place of origin? Because I'd like to believe that love will always win, that truth will always come to the surface, and truth is born on the other side of death. And yet, if we've been lied to for 80 years, why are they still in power? Why is this not shattered? Why is this karma not come back and bitten them in the ass and gone and now step down?
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing is there's individual karmas, there's individual like personal karmas, right, as human beings, and then we have collective karmas, like the United States government karma. So individually, if you look at anyone who's been the president, they suffered greatly. Our presidents have suffered greatly. When they go out of office, check in on George W. Bush right now. He's basically having full-on breakdowns. He paints paintings of the individuals, the spirits that he can feel that were bombed in the Middle East during his presidency. He does amazing watercolor and acrylic. Check him out on YouTube. George W. Bush, yeah. This guy who of the faces of people that he bombed while he was the president, he's a very delicate man. He was put in there through the whole mafioso system of his own family. He didn't want to be president. Like, so individually, they're each going to have their karma. The United States as an entire entity, because it's so many different people that are like, it just takes longer. But just like Rome, it will fall. It will fall. And we're getting close.
And that's what I'm starting to feel, is that it's like the veil keeps getting thinner and thinner. And I mean, right, we attract the reality and essentially our immediate reality and what we're putting out. And what my immediate reality is just people that are waking up, people that are like being, at least starting the question of why, or even being in some sort of question period. Yeah. And so that's my reality. I'm starting to see people to question the status quo, question their purpose, question the system. And so in my reality, I'm seeing that this shift is already happening. And yet simultaneously, then I go to the airport and I sit at the airport gate and I look around and I'm like, and this is not the general consensus.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, when is this karma going to come back? Because ultimately, even if nobody saw it, even if no one else was in the space and you stole something, but no one else knew, it's recorded in the Akashic.
Absolutely. It's an energetic frequency, right? That is always a part of who we be once it is done, thought, said, right? So the way that I sense, the way that I intuit, receive the unfolding of what we're in right now is a opportunity for those of us who have the passion of awakening. It is our karma to speak about it and share about it. And that like urgency that we feel in our bodies, it will be our counter karma if we don't. Right?
So can you break that down?
Counter karma, basically, you and I both have a drive within us to share this message of self-liberation, freedom, safety, truth, love that is available to us in every moment. The more and more we drop into present moment awareness, the more I release my traumas of pulling me into the past and thinking about what I've done and who's done it to me, or into the future about worrying what will be. The more I bring myself here and now and are no longer pulled to the past or the future, the more power, presence, and awareness that I have to gift to the world, and the more enjoyable my sensory experience is, the more that I'm here. And so that's the message. The more you are here, the more enjoyable it is. It doesn't mean it will always be happy. It doesn't mean it'll always be good, but I will be able to be in joy, which is the river of life, connected to life, the more I am present. What we see right now in our society is a culture of distraction. People are living in the past, blaming whoever it is that they need to blame as to why their situation is what it is, or worried about what's going to happen in the future if they don't do X, Y, and Z. That's where most people live most of the time. It's like in the sides of the bell curve. They're not living in the juice of the bell curve, right? The bell curve, the center part of our human experience, is presence. It's right here. It's right now. But if people are worried about what's happened to them in the past, or being pulled into their triggers, into their loops because of trauma, or they're projecting into the future around worry, then they can't be fully here. And for those of us who are fully here, our work is to bring that message forward, is to bring that experience more than even message, right? Like when you and I do a podcast, run a weekend, any of these things, it's not so much that we are giving information, we are offering a transmission. Mm-hmm. We're offering an opportunity for people to have a felt experience of a different reality. Very unlikely that people will remember everything that you and I say in this podcast, but they will feel an experience that they say, that's something that I've felt before and I want to feel more of that. That's what makes a popular podcast. It's not necessarily the information, but the transmission of energy that comes through my present moment awareness, your present moment awareness, alchemized into this. So counter karma would be is if we don't listen to that call, if we don't strategize well enough, if we don't activate to the point where we can tip this planet, we're not going to survive. That's the ultimate counter karma, is we're not going to survive as human species. The world will be fine. The earth will be fine. It's us as human beings that will not be able to survive if this ozone changes the way it will dramatically change if we remove all the plasma from the earth. There's what's going to happen. So our counter karma is heeding the call in order to not only live our purpose, but also to be in that conversation, to be in the transmission of the experience of what it truly means to be experiencing all of ourselves here and now.
And so, okay, I'm hearing the call.
Hear the
Hearing it for a while.
Yes.
And yet another question that comes up is, all right, so I'm hearing the call, I'm feeling it alive, I'm ready to question the status quo, and I'm gonna go take it to Instagram, because that is the platform that I know that can speak to a few thousand people, whatever. But Instagram has censorship.
Yes, it does.
And so you can only say so much that fits in with the parameters of what they're holding.
Yep.
But the second you step a couple feet out of the parameters of what they're holding, you get a warning. Now, you get 3 warnings and you're out.
Have you ever gotten a warning?
I have received, I think, I got a warning on YouTube, but it was a mistake.
Okay.
On Instagram, I think I've received a couple of warnings about false information that I have posted around vaccinations, even though in my eyes it wasn't false information. And that's about it. But now that I say that out loud, I'm like, I'm not pushing hard enough. I'm clearly not pushing hard enough here. No, have you?
I've said some spicy things.
Spicy things?
Some spicy things. The things that I got
Spicy
warning.
you?
I know, big surprise.
Wow.
But the things I got warnings for weren't that great. Like a nip was showing in a picture, and I was like, damn it, like that's not even. You're not going to say anything about me making comments of Arab Spring? No, you're going to comment about my nip? Okay, got it. That was one. And then I called someone a whore, and it was considered hate speech and bullying. I got flagged for hate speech and bullying. But I call people whores like you fucking whore. Like, that's a compliment.
Babe, how did you just call someone a whore?
Just like, you're just a fucking radical whore or something like that, you know? Just like, get it. And she and I had that rapport. I wouldn't just do that with someone I hadn't like called a whore in 3D or we didn't have that understanding. In my lens, it's a compliment. Yeah, you're a woman in your
Can we just do a slight tangent? How is a whore a compliment in your lens?
Well, in this specific relationship, I wouldn't necessarily call everyone a whore. In this specific relationship, she actually has received money for sex, that she actually has been a whore, and she champions that as part of her own empowerment. So
she loves it.
She loves it. So she actually is a whore.
Got flagged.
I got flagged for hate speech.
Basically, like speaking her love language.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And I've seen
the general consensus around that word is like, you don't call people that.
Yeah.
Ideally. I mean, that was my narrative. I wouldn't. But anyways, right, got it. I can totally understand how you got flagged for that. Got it. So what I'm starting to see, right, there's somebody that I follow on Instagram. I think he's brilliant. His name is JP Spears, and he is a comedian. And he's now pushing, that the lies that are being told. And he's using his comedy platforms to share this message. He's been threatened to be taken off Instagram and Facebook. I also follow somebody who is a survivor of child sex trafficking, and she is basically on the run right now because people are following her, and she is on Instagram like doing lives, and she has multiple backup accounts because she keeps getting threatened to be taken down.
So wild.
And it's just this censorship that I'm starting to notice with anybody that's standing up and out.
Mm-hmm.
And if then our counter karma is to stand up to this and to speak our truth and to raise our voice, but the platform that we do use to do that is censoring us, what do we do?
Yeah, this is a great question. I want to unpack those two individuals a little bit and then go back into non-binary thinking. I think for JP Spears, I don't follow him personally, but have been tuning in a little bit more around what he's bringing forward. And he's so far in the binary that it's really hard to listen to him if you have anything else to say. Like, he's taken his comedy, in my opinion, this is totally my opinion, he's taken his comedy and he's using it almost as a weapon for those who don't agree with him. And while they're in his reality, I can imagine that maybe there's still something like funny or like ironic about what he's saying. The tone in which he's doing it is very blamey. Like, he's blaming a lot of people. And it's also really challenging to be anyone, but especially a white man who outright supports Trump. And so when he came out, right, and said that he supported Trump, I think that turned a lot of people off to him, whether that was true or a joke or anything of reality, at a time when we were having really intense, like, racial interactions. And Trump, as the president, was using his social platform to create more dissonance in our country. So whether JP is doing this for reals or it's a joke or he's expressing his truth, I think the way he's going about it is very binary. It's right or wrong. It's this or nothing. It's this or you're stupid. And while that used to be a part of his comedy, the texture of where we're at this time is so sensitive and so subtle that I think he's lost his tact, to be completely honest. Whether what he's saying is true or not, I'm not here to say. There's some things that he says that I'm like, yes, I'm aligned with that. There's some things that he says and I'm like, you're absolutely off your rocker. But that's not even the point. The point is that he has gone into a place that is so, it's either this or that. He's also one that's like, if you're wearing a mask, then you're living in fear paradigm. Well, it's like, no, that's someone who's taking a calculated risk. Like, there's no spaciousness with you. And this is coming from someone who's super fiery and like has to work with binary thinking within myself. Like, the reason why I'm talking about this, or even why I feel like I've talked about the dominion versus domination model, like a circle model versus a pyramidal model, is because I have so much domination and so much binary thinking in me as a fire sign, as an academic woman, as a white woman, as someone who's been trained by this culture. I can see in me the tendency to want to be right or wrong, to want to be the one who has the answer. So I'm not critiquing him as an individual. What I'm critiquing is his style as it's being shown now through his comedy. I don't think it's super useful, actually, for awakening. I think he's being more detrimental to anyone who considers themselves part of the spiritual path. Yeah, he lost me about 6 months ago, where I was just like, brother, even if what you're saying is correct, you're only going to be able to, his listeners, the only ones who listen to him now are the ones who already align with his thinking. And the whole point of being an influencer, if you will, or what I like to call an activator, right? Beyond activist is the activator. To truly activate someone is to invite them in a space where otherwise they wouldn't be able to listen, because their fear programming would come up and shut you down. The key, the finesse, the zhuzh is to learn. This is my learning, not my expertise. This is my learning, not my expertise, is to learn how to finesse that conversation to reach places that we otherwise might have not been able to reach. No one is going to change them. In my experience, I've never changed my mind because someone comes at me with an allegorical bat and wants to hit me upside the head with all the truth. That's never worked for me personally. What has worked for me, what has gotten me to change my mind, has been small little questions around like, is that true? How do you know that's true? Where did you get that information from? I'm really curious about your experience. Can you tell me more about that? Those types of questions open up the space for conversation. Whereas a lot of people right now on all sides, not just the right, not just the left, but all sides are, it's either this way or we shut you down. It's either this way or it's not true. And that's the binary thinking that I find to be so dangerous, whether we're talking about authoritarian regimes or interpersonal conversations. It's, can we open up and experience where on the elephant this person has their hand, and get more curious about their experience than making sure that they hear mine. Only in that frame, I'm more curious about your experience than making sure that you hear mine, can we actually have our experience shared. Because only when someone feels gotten do they actually become naturally curious about someone else if they are ready for that awakening experience, right? If as an activator, my role is to support someone in their awakening so that they can get on the team and we can awaken all beings so they're not endlessly suffering in our own past and past life trauma. My role then is to become an incredibly good listener, an incredibly good question asker, and a transmitter of experience, not information. Experience. Even in this podcast, right? It's not so much about remembering the information, but feeling the experience. So that's number one. Number two, about our sister who has the Instagram accounts that continually be shut down, and she herself is a sex slave survivor. I don't know her personally. What I do know is three things. One, it's incredibly important that we get these stories out and let them be heard, and get a platform that doesn't shut them down continuously. So whether it's Instagram or something else, we need to
just screenshotted. There's all these other alternate platforms like Parler or Parler. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Is the new Twitter, and there's like this whole breakdown, and it's like, how can we actually make the shift as a collective?
Yeah.
Like shift off of Instagram into another platform.
Yeah. Well, a lot of us shifted off of Facebook. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's not
but then
impossible.
Facebook just bought all the other platforms that we wanted to move to.
Yeah.
Because Instagram was not originally owned by Facebook, and then now Facebook owns WhatsApp as well. By the way, so that's completely like all documented.
Well, everything's all documented. Signal, Telegram, all of it's documented. We just need to really get real with ourselves. There's nothing on your iPhone that's protected. Just get real, okay? So enjoy the idea that we can protect ourselves, because we've never. Have you ever read the terms and agreements on your iPhone before you check that box? Nobody has. And it says, I'll tell you what it says. Everything that goes into your phone is owned by Apple. There it is. So if you're texting Signal or you do a phone call on Signal, it's just as recorded as on WhatsApp. It's just as recorded on Facebook Messenger. You might as well be posting it on your motherfucking Facebook wall. So the illusion of protection, the illusion of COVID, the illusion of these things is what's keeping us distracted. At the end of the day, we're all being tracked. Congratulations. We're all being listened to. It's so wonderful. And none of us are really that important enough or that revolutionary enough to be doing anything yet. And when we are, you'll remember this conversation. It's important that we acknowledge that we are not safe right now to be saying exactly what it is that we want and actually organizing as a people. We live in an authoritarian government. They will shut us down. And that's okay for us to acknowledge it rather than pretend like, I don't know what to do because there's so much that we could do, but there's nothing. No, what we want to do is organize a space where we can have a voice where our information, our stories, our transmissions will not be shut down, number one. Number two, we want to allocate our tax resources to creating more life, not taking life through war. Number three, we want to become a government that is a stand for people's rights, liberties, and pursuit of happiness, which includes, number one, protecting the children. Until a government is able to do those three things, there's no need for a government. Get the fuck out of here. So a little bit of anarchist comes out in me in that. But the truth is, my truth is that in this, it's important for us to remember non-binary thinking. Even in what I'm saying, I don't know the whole truth. This is my hand on the elephant, right? Like, this is my patch of the elephant in the conference room, what I'm able to describe blindfolded here. So I acknowledge that fully, and I acknowledge that I don't have the full truth. But I have been standing at this elephant for a little bit longer, really feeling its crevices, so I can describe certain things that a lot of individuals do not want to know about. We don't want to know that every time we fill our car with gas, that was 15 to 25 people's lives. That sucks to feel. I used to say when I was in college, you're not depressed, you're empathetic. You're finally feeling what is happening on the planet. That's not depression you're feeling. That's called connection and empathy. Let's get real. We don't need drugs. We don't need alcohol. We don't need these things. We need to stop murdering human beings on the planet. That will help a lot. So the thing around censorship, finding a platform that can support us, and then getting really, I don't know, maybe we create code words. I don't know what it is.
We create what?
Code words. Or some way to communicate on these platforms that allows for the curious inquiry without the direct flagellant attacks. So it's almost like if and I'm learning this because, like I said, I'm fiery as fuck, and I get all sorts of, if I can be in the space where I'm getting more curious of like, I'm curious about this subject and post from that place of curiosity rather than from the place of binary, it's a lot harder for them to censor me. Now, for someone who's sharing a personal experience, like something like sex slavery, I don't have personal experience with that getting shut down, so I don't know what the dynamic is there or how she's getting shut down by Instagram. But
well, what
I'm
she's
curious.
actually doing is working in a sense, where it's like, from my personal experience, I've had multiple accounts because I've had this conversation with many people about my curiosity, my questions around this. This is becoming up as a red flag, big red flag, something that wants my attention. And then this individual account got sent to me multiple times. So on the second time it got sent to me, I was like, all right, cool, I'm listening. And then I went into the experience, and it took me, has and still is taking me down a very deep rabbit hole that I am not unfamiliar with. I have been down multiple rabbit holes, specifically around child pedophilia in Hollywood and the Hollywood elite rings. And I'm just super curious about it. Living in Los Angeles, very close to,
right here.
for these conversations, 30 minutes away from my own front door. And the power that this center has over the influence of the rest of the planet.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of power here, and you want to follow the yellow brick road. That yellow brick road goes into a very dark, deep, scary place. Yeah. And this stuff that this woman is sharing on her Instagram account, I'm following it, and she says a name. I then go do some research on that name, and I'm finding information about these individuals that are essentially like what the government would call whistleblowers on the things that are happening. And there is crazy amount of evidence, and yet simultaneously, for me, what the piece here is, and something that I think that you do very well, and yet I also find myself very conflicted, is like study. But there's so much misinformation online. And it's like, what am I studying? What is my intuition? What is my fear? And yet there's this tug that's like, hey, once you know about it, once you even feel it, not that I even know with a capital K, like I don't know, but I feel it, right? You say either depressed or you have empathy, you're feeling it. I'm feeling it. It's not depression, but I am feeling this fire that feels like the reality that is set up right now is white paint on mold.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, well, let's just put paint over the top of it. And let's have this over here and this store and this thing over here. And let's set up a beautiful home and have this thing. But yet in my inner workings, it's like, I can't unfeel this. So my curiosity is taking me down these rabbit holes. And yet then I'm in this rabbit hole with a million misfires of misinformation and a lot of truths. And it's like, who do I turn to? Where do I go? Whoever is speaking about this on a public platform is being shut down unless it's an independent platform. I've had a conversation with somebody that has been deep in the child sex trafficking, and I've had a podcast episode with him.
Great podcast. What
really
number is
beautiful. The number, I don't remember the number, with Michael Matushi.
Highly suggest that podcast.
Really, really powerful. And he's really coming from a place where he's worked with a lot of survivors.
Also a really good example of non-binary thinking. He really, he's holding a strong line of like, this shouldn't be happening, and compassion for this whole experience. Like his level of compassion, even for the perpetrators, and even the ways that he was suggesting that we go after these individuals, he really comes from more of a restorative justice paradigm. And I think that podcast is a really good one to look at someone who's really tackling a subject that could easily go, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. And he comes at it with a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity. Right. So going back to your question of like, how do we post about these things? I think we do it with curiosity of like, you know what, this is the information that I had, and the question that I have about it is this, rather than saying, this is the information, this is the truth. If it's framed as, this is the research that I've done, this is the question that I have about it now. So it's not my information that I'm touting as truth. It's this information that I received, and these are the questions that I have about it. It's almost like a sideways way of sharing it without becoming one of those people who needs to put the stake in the ground and needs to say, like, this is the truth. We actually don't know. That's the ultimate truth.
And then this very fiery part of me also, like when I read the news, which I very, 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 very rarely do, but I read about it just got presented to me on Instagram about the vaccinations and how they're creating a vaccination passport. I swear I went hot on the inside. And I posted on Instagram story, you can fuck right off with your vaccinations, period.
Yeah.
And I did it right before I went to sleep. And I was like, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have so many messages. And I felt like it was going to be pretty conflicting messages back. I woke up, I had probably like 25 messages on my inbox, and 100% of them were like, damn right.
Yeah.
Like everybody was in agreement with it. And I'm being really mindful of like what I'm sharing on my platform.
Yeah.
And I'm learning while simultaneously the platform is growing. And I have this fire, and I have this pecking away at me, and I have this privilege, and I have this voice. And so I'm like learning to dance with it while simultaneously, and I think this conversation is really important, is to be in the non-binary of like, I don't know, what feels very true for me is you can fuck off with your vaccination.
Yes.
It's not going in my arm.
Yes.
Or wherever else you want to poke
Yes. 100%. Because as an influencer, as soon as we make a statement without a question, as soon as we make a statement, we are responsible for that statement. And we're responsible for the way that it impacts others. So if it can be framed in a question and reminding people that we are not in domination model, I'm not on a pedestal, I actually don't know what the fuck is going on. And for me and your vaccines, you can go fuck yourself. I know nothing. I'm not telling anyone else what they should do. And I actually know nothing if this vaccine would be good or bad for me. But from my intuition and where I stand, fuck you. That's very different than just a fuck you. It's very different. And it frames it in a way that allows you to have full self-expression, that allows you to take responsibility for the fact that you have a following that's very dedicated to you and your behaviors, right? You're the kind of influencer, Blu, that people aren't just interested in what you're doing and how you're doing it, all the things. You're creating a movement with your brand. And with that comes a certain level of responsibility that everything that you say will be taken literally on some level by someone at some point. And it's a lot of fucking responsibility.
It makes me emotional.
Yeah.
Because
it's huge.
I care so much
I know
about
you
the
do.
Bluebird. Like I
Love
care
you
about
so much. We love you, Bluebirds.
So much about this opportunity that has presented itself in a very organic fashion, and it feels so good and so true in my system. And simultaneously, my wish is to be able to truly serve medicine of the most empowering for the individuals that tune into it. And this is what I got in return to okay, I feel this fire, I feel this level of responsibility, and simultaneously, what do I do with this now? And that was my question, sitting in the desert. What do I do with this? And what I got in return? Train.
Yeah.
Train your body, train your mind, train your heart, get aligned on all planes of your existence.
Yes.
Clean your home, live in integrity, live what you speak.
Yes.
And get that in order so that your ship does not have holes in it, because it's just going to keep getting bigger. And so actually what I've noticed while living with Andre, we've moved into a new home. We're in the home right now. We're at the dining room table. Welcome. What I have learned from him was at the beginning of our relationship, there were certain things that I would do that were not in aligned with the version of myself I was calling in, and he would judge it. Be like, well, what are you doing? And I could feel that energy. And that energy of judgment actually made me want to do the very opposite. And I wanted to keep doing that behavior, because that energy, I was like, and I would push him away and then go into it even more.
Yes.
What I've actually learned while living with him, and we've had a deep conversation about this, and he shifted it from being like, listen, I want the best for you, and simultaneously, I'm not attached to the outcome. I am going to just continue to stay in my lane. And from him doing that, and I could feel a very significant shift, he's now actually stayed living with me now in a close environment, and he is doing his practice every morning, and he's cleaning his environment, and he's in bed by 9 p.m. and he's reading his book, and he's like, he's very, very integrous individual. Now, by me just living with him and witnessing the alignment that is born from his commitment, I find it irresistible to want to do it all the time. And so what I'm now, presenting itself even in real time right now on this podcast is if I want to continue to utilize my platform in a place of empowerment for the individuals, first and foremost, I must empower myself on all plane of existence. I must clear my mind. I must do my morning practice. I must clear my environment. I must strengthen my physical vessel. I must be aligned with the food that I eat, with the hands that created it, and where is it coming from, and blessing my food and my water before I drink it and consume it. Like all of these different things that are presenting themselves for me as an opportunity to up level is literally what I will birth through my creations.
Yes. 100%. 100%. There was something really beautiful you said there too, is like when he came at you with judgment, it had you do the rubber band effect, right? Where it's like pulled and it like boom, and it hits you in the hand. You know what I mean? Where it's like once he understood to stay in his own lane and continuing to radiate his truth, then you felt inclined to do the same for yourself. I feel it's the same for anyone who is an influencer, right? Like we get to really not be judgmental and understand that any judgment that comes our way is most of the time projection, but that the essence of what we're creating has got to be from a place of non-judgment. And if what we're creating is from a place of judgment, then we're only creating more judgment, even if the judgment that we have is right. Because of course, we're not posting judgments that we think are wrong, right? I have a judgment about the American government, or I have a judgment about JP Spears, or I have a judgment about coronavirus. If I pose it in that frequency, that's the frequency that's going to continue. That's the frequency. It's not the content, it's the context that reverberates. So the content is secondary. It's important, but it's secondary to the context of the vibrational frequency. The vibrational frequency that we want is awakening. The vibrational frequency that we want is forgiveness. The vibrational frequency that we want is safety, freedom, truth, and love for all that sacred force, all right? Like la fuerza sagrada, truly the sacred force of what it means to be a human being is to create safe spaces for each other to exist in harmony. That's every human being's purpose. If you didn't know your purpose, I just gave it to you. Congratulations. It is our job to create spaces of safety for each other to exist in harmony. That's what humans are here to do, for each other, for the plants, and for the animals. We are the strongest limbic system creature on this planet, which means we have acknowledgement of self. Other things do not have acknowledgement of self. They have the interconnected felt experience of the ecology that surrounds them, but they do not have the derivation, the delineation of self. We do. Therefore, it is our responsibility to create a safe environment for all beings, plants, animals, and other humans, because that is what our limbic system is set up to do. And when we're not doing that, we feel purposeless and depressed, aka the majority of the planet, because we've been taught that happiness and purpose has something to do with gains and achievement, when all it has to do with is creating safe spaces for each other. That's it. And when we can utilize our platforms to be spaces of communication and opening rather than shutting down, when we open rather than shut down, when we open up the possibility of more than just this or that, we're actually creating safe spaces, then we are creating heaven on earth. What the content is secondary. It's coronavirus right now. It's going to be petroleum next week. It's sex slavery. It's the water issues. It's the food issue. We've got so much content that we get to transmute in this lifetime. But the context is, in what frequency do we want to reach for the next iteration of what it means to be human? We have to embody that frequency now when we deliver our content. That is the non-binary, is to understand the all oneness from that place while addressing content that is very much in the binary.
How are your unicorn tears going?
So good. I'm almost done. I was a little burpy earlier, so if anyone heard me burping, that was me. It was good. Delicious.
So we're joking, you know, when I was like, when we have a podcast with Briana Lynn, we go in and we go deep and we uncover. And the beautiful thing is that whatever comes through you just doesn't run out. It's an infinite supply. You can just put your attention and intention onto one thing, and then all of a sudden you have a wellspring of information flow through you. And again, like I shared at the beginning of this podcast, the reason why I have exponentially up-leveled, or just, ultimately learn to love and give acknowledgement to all parts of myself, has been in the presence of somebody that has been doing it for themselves for so long. And so at the beginning of the podcast, I got a very clear hit that there was going to be specific people that are going to be reoccurring guests on the podcast, and then having new people come in occasionally, and then just have these consistent reoccurring individuals. And it just feels really good to be able to continue to cover a plethora of topics, and also the conviction which you speak about these specific things coming from a non-binary perspective is actually a space that I feel like I can lean into, because in a world of misinformation, it's very difficult to lean in. And also in a world where stillness and silence is quite hard to come by these days, which is where the intuition is born. Yeah. Intuition is born when we can actually marinate in our own energy. But if you live on the third story of an apartment complex in the middle of the city, finding your intuition is a very difficult conversation or a very difficult experience. And so having someone that is coming from a non-binary perspective, but with a level of conviction and truth from their own personal lens, is refreshing. And I think that people, and that essentially use the word influencers, right? It's like, this is the age of influencers. I've never seen the age of influencers ever before. This is the first time in my life that influencers are now a thing. And it's like, what are we influencing? Because people want to follow what they resonate with and what they believe in and what they feel to be true in their body and in their bones, that actually when it comes down to it, what keeps them safe, what allows them to feel loved, to be loved in return. I mean, ultimately we need leaders and influencers to really actually be able to share their truth from a non-binary perspective, to support individuals, for the empowerment of individuals, not placing anybody anymore on a pedestal. And I've always said 2020 is the year of shattering pedestals, placing anybody on a pedestal. And so I just, without putting on a pedestal, also just want to acknowledge the study that you've done behind the scenes, your factual understanding of what actually just happened, in the sense of like a historical perspective, and your willingness to dive into the taboo and the challenging topics, and to come from a place of conviction, because it's really rare these days. While simultaneously being in the I don't know. This is a beautiful dance. So I think that's a really good, beautiful place to close it out. Totally. And just also know that this is a ... to be continued.
Absolutely.
And Lily's in the background. She's just gonna join in to close out the podcast. As you know, we are still at the dining room table in my house.
Wonderful. Don't want to be anywhere else.
And
it's
we've got
so
all
good.
of
so good.
The background cheering on. Lily has made it into, I would say, most episodes of Deja Blu. So thanks for chiming in, little snavvy. Briana, fuck yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Truly an honor to share space with you. And we're about to cruise into a weekend called Daughters of the Moon, and we're supporting with creating a safe space, a healthy, clean, COVID-free space, and continuing this work out in the real world. So it's such an honor to be able to collaborate with you, co-create with you, to co-facilitate with you, to learn from you, and to be by your side. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to share before we close out?
Just if anyone wants to get a hold of me, theearthtemple.com, at Reverend Briana Lynn, RevBriana Lynn, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the things.
All the things.
And that's it. And I love you.
Amazing.
Yes, please, more thank you.
Thank you, Mama. And what are your offerings currently that people would be getting in touch with you about?
Nothing. Don't get in contact. No, I'm actually taking a break till mid-January. So, but the biggest thing is our priestess training, which is called Earth Witch Academy, and Sacred Circle Facilitators training, both of which launch in July, which are year-long programs to dive deeper into the shamanic arts, one specifically for female ID'd only, the other one is an open course. So it's the year-long training.
I am currently in the round one of the 1 year long program.
It's phenomenal. And this is for people who want to learn shamanic integration tools for any emotional experience, any traumatic experience, any cathartic experience, any beautiful experience. How do we actually integrate our human experience so that it then becomes fuel for our life? And I believe that shamanism, ancient and modern technologies, give us access to integrate all parts of self so that it can become a teaching for ourselves and others that we want to share with. So this is specifically for those who want to be facilitators of the deeper teachings.
I was about to say sign me up, but I'm already in it.
You're already in it. You're already a facilitator in it. What are you talking about?
It's a vibe. I'm into it. Amazing. So if you want to be a part of the next round of Sacred Circle Facilitator training with myself and Briana and a few other epic wizards and all of the things, then you can reach out to Briana with the information. I will also put it in the description of this podcast so that you can access her. And yeah, I feel like that is it for today. Going deep, keeping it light, how we do. And to all of you beautiful bluebirds, I truly mean this from the bottom of my heart and from every single cell in my body. I am so grateful for you tuning in, sharing on your Instagram, sharing the message of this podcast, passing on to your friends, passing on to individuals that you feel like could benefit from this information, and for genuinely your support. Like, I receive so many messages on a daily basis from individuals that have tuned into the podcast and shared stories of how this has shifted their lives, of how they've opened themselves up to magic, how 2020 has significantly shifted for them since tuning into the podcast from day one. And so I'm just like, honestly, it's one of my favorite offerings that I have, and it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for all of you. So for you listening to this right now in this very moment, these words are from my heart to yours. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love you so much. I'm so grateful. So may you feel seen and heard and loved and supported and held in all of the ways, and just know that you're not in this alone. We're in the inquiry with you from the beautiful 3 words, I don't know, and the non-binary perspective, and how we can share our message while trusting in the divinity of all of it. Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And until next time. And so it is.